Sapoops, happy SG60! Now, with that out of the way, if you don't know what Mothership is one of your Sapoops' favorite Instagram feeds of all time, a news, current affairs, and entertainment site for tomorrow's generations and today's, run by the younger people right here. Generally pretty on point, very fun, they do a good job. Which is probably why at this point it is the second most used online news site in the entirety of Singapore. And partly it's because they create this viral content that is very easy to share.
Like this, for example.
Good job, guys. But recently, I found myself asking questions about their SG60 series though. Is this propaganda? If you go on Instagram right now and you search up #Mothership SG60, you're gonna find this whole series of posts right here, all about Singapore's independence. And some common names come to the fore. You can see right here, Malaysian, UMNO, Barisan, Malay, Malaysian. Literally, in this entire week right here, we've just had posts all about different ways that Malaysia relates to Singapore, such as with the godfather of the DAP, Mr. Devan Nair, who was also the third president of Singapore, by the way. And you can see all these interesting historical tidbits that are coming on along the way. These posts are very detailed and classic Mothership style, chock full of interesting information to sort of, I don't know if you want to say set the record straight, but it kind of sets a very specific narrative, we can say, even as they repeatedly talk about a bad breakup. And that's what it was, right? We know, of course, that it was not a happy thing by any means, filled with racial riots, competing visions of how Malaysia should be run. Malaysia, which was what Lee Kuan Yew called for, and a Malay-dominated Malaysia, which is what our UMNO establishment under the alliance was basically gunning for all the while. I want to emphasize, I really like these posts because they actually tie into a lot of history that I've read about before, I've come to understand and appreciate. I think my favorite of this entire series so far, although I think there's gonna be more, is this series of posts showcasing Lee Kuan Yew's last speech in Parliament, which you can find at the National Archives actually, and go ahead and read for yourself. I think it's well worth reading. But this post, as you can see, is just pretty much highlighting the back and forth between Mahathir and LKY, talking about how these people have never known Malay rule, showcasing founding PM Lee's perspective about how no, there isn't a push to become a Chinese state. It doesn't make sense to delude people into thinking that if they don't have Malay right, they will be poor, and frankly, I think we've seen quite a fair bit of that in Malaysia, and we kind of know where the history already is, as I've kind of written right over here.
Oh yeah, and this thing which happened in 2025 by the way.
Kita layan tetamu kita dengan elok, tetapi kita perlu tahu siapa tuan rumah. Kita tak akan khianat dan zalim orang-orang bukan Melayu ataupun orang-orang bukan Islam kalau yang berkuasanya ialah dari kalangan orang Islam.
Speaking in Bahasa Melayu, by the way, speaking with full conviction about how he could bring Malaysia to the next level in the national language of Malaysia, in a way that all of the parliamentarians could understand and that they were spellbound by, terrified by, and eventually decided to kick out Singapore for. And so, yes, I don't deny that all of the things that were described in the Mothership post actually happened, but I just have to question, like, what exactly is the purpose of releasing all of these posts right before SG60? That single word can't escape my mind, that it's propaganda. Now, if you don't know what propaganda means, it means communication that is primarily used to influence or persuade an audience to further a specific agenda, often by selectively presenting information to encourage a particular viewpoint. Which kind of seems like it fits the evidence that we see right there. Like, yes, we know that SG60 is coming. We know nationalistic spirit is kind of desirable when you're dealing with something like that, but a lot of this seems to be at Malaysia's expense. Now, let me be first to say that Malaysia is not blameless at all. There are many policies, I would say, namely an obsession with race and religion, and no shortage of populist politicians who will just gaslight their people over and over again into thinking that's the most important thing in the world. Hold back Malaysia in ways that make me wonder whether it's 2025 or we're actually still in 1965 as people yap constantly about race and religion without stopping. But I find it kind of rich to paint Malaysia as totally unstable and fundamentalist as you construct an enemy or a vision of what you don't want to be, even as you paint Singapore as completely innocent and blameless. Because to me, you know what that seems like? That seems like weaponizing history. And you know, Singapore actually has laws against that, like for example, the Foreign Interference Countermeasures Act, which basically deals with narrative warfare from state and non-state actors that aims to undermine trust in state institutions, which is something that Singapore has spoken out very loudly against because it's an existential threat, right? Like, you have a society that's basically multiracial, your only natural resource is human talent, so you need to make sure that people are actually on point and not getting put into conflict by what someone overseas is saying. See, even Vivian Balakrishnan, your current Minister of Foreign Affairs, once said,
The internet and digital information ecosystem has reshaped the way people see the world.
because we're not just facing cyber attacks anymore, we are facing cognitive attacks, while Shanmugam declared that
we want to keep foreign influence out of our political environment, not allow foreigners to influence our own political processes.
Well, I should say that
foreign actors often do not push outright lies, but instead exploit existing grievances and manipulate historical interpretations to divide societies. Which is interesting because it seems almost like that's exactly what Mothership is doing right now. We could speculate all we want about the ownership of Mothership from now until SG1000, but in a way, it kind of makes sense that they would want to do this. I mean, like, if we look at Benedict Anderson and Ernst Renan, every nation needs heroes and triumphs, villains, threats, or failures to define itself against, and Singapore is no different. Like, if we think about Malaysia, it's basically the country that rejected Singapore, its natural beating heart, went on with race-based policies that Singapore transcended, and Malaysia was the country that was disorderly while Singapore became calm, green, and well-governed. It's kind of like how when you have a light, there will be a shadow. These things coexist. If there is no light, then there is no shadow. If there is no shadow, then there is no light. And I totally get that this is easy to showcase how Singapore thrived despite getting kicked out from Malaysia or negotiated with Tunku Abdul Rahman, depending on who you believe, as a story of survival against the odds, discipline over disorder, meritocracy against cronyism, and finally, multiracial harmony over a Malay-dominant Malaysia, where somehow Malaysia becomes the cautionary tale of what could happen if everything goes wrong, the failed alternative, a place of perpetual instability. It kind of makes Singaporeans be thankful for what they have and then say, oh my gosh, thank God we left. We're so amazing, we're so awesome, 3.5 to 1. Admittedly, I can see where that's all coming from, but I think that's unfortunate because you're creating a clean binary that makes it very us versus them, you know? Like, you're kind of strengthening your own base and saying to all the Singaporean people, we are one united people. But the way that you're doing it is only presenting some aspects of history that are negative between our countries without even showcasing to people the ways that we actually manage to engage with one another. It seems to me very much like zero-sum thinking. But hey, for all we know, maybe it really is just historical truth-telling. What do you think, Sapupus? Let me know down in the comments. And you know, some people might then say, well, this is a response to the podcast that KJ did with Pritam Singh. But it seems to me kind of like petty to do that in the first place, and it makes me wonder, right? Are there not more mature ways to build nationalistic spirit for Singapore instead of just creating a common enemy in the form of Malaysia? Because, news for you, we are not enemies. There have been times that we've been adversarial to one another, but we share plenty of common ties, connections that span across the entirety of our history of engagement together. Sure, there were times when Tan Siew Sin, for example, tried to ask for more money. Mahathir tried to renegotiate the water agreement. But it is a fact that even now, in the modern age, Singapore is one of Malaysia's largest trading partners, and we get cheaper processed water than we would be able to get if we were to produce a processing plant ourselves, because Singapore is helping us out. So at least in my opinion, I feel like there are many more things that could be shared that highlight the way that we were actually able to work productively with one another that don't involve just using these historical grievances and potentially weaponizing them and using them as cheap bait to go around celebrating, oh my gosh, we are Singapore, we are so amazing, SG60, let's go. But don't get me wrong, I think that it's a great series of posts because a lot of people don't really think about what happened in that history. In fact, fact, that's something that even Singapore's current coordinating Minister for Public Services, Minister for Defence and Minister in charge of the Public Service actually implemented before he was Minister of Defence and was the Minister of Education instead, creating all of these books to be sent to schools all across Singapore to sort of encourage people to think about history, to question it, and to sort of confront the hard questions. Taking the spirit that this kind of initiative actually brought forward, I think it's important for us to have hard conversations about the things that happen, but that definitely comes from taking a wider and broader context rather than just framing things from one specific point of view. I appreciate what Mothership has created, but I just wish that there were a much more healthy and nuanced conversation about the relationship between Malaysia and Singapore that didn't involve Malaysia being cast as a bogeyman as the price for building a so-called national sentiment, this SG60. I know that you guys are great, but if you're great, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the expense of Malaysia. Defining us as an other and saying that we shouldn't talk so much about one another when very obviously, even on Mothership, you can see that people are talking about how Malaysians should start work at 21 to tackle the aging population problem, featuring Rafizi, and Mahathir calling Anwar an amazing liar for questioning legitimacy of his son's wealth. Make no mistake, I think that foreign interference is a real thing, but I hope that the people on the Singapore side can actually find better and more productive ways of contributing towards our unity across borders. Because remember, if we're really honestly looking at history, under British colonialism, Singapore was beating heart of the colonial empire and Malaysia was the natural hinterland. It's true that now we have sovereign borders and we are different countries, but at the heart of it, because of these natural ties of geography, relations, and so many other things, I think that we can move towards a greater consciousness, not just of Singapore as an independent entity, but also of the unity of the territories in terms of creating something great, improving, better, and that can contribute towards the world as a whole. Enough of making Malaysia into some sort of imaginary enemy, when there are so many more better and good things that we can do together. But of course, if it's all just a historical lesson and it doesn't have any purpose beyond that, then I stand corrected, and this is nothing more than just a simple rant about issues that we should have discussed and in fact that Mothership is causing to be discussed at this point in time. But what do you think, friends? Is Mothership's SG60 series anti-Malaysian propaganda? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And to all of you Singaporeans out there, happy SG60, happy Diamond Jubilee, and here's to many more successes in the days ahead as you go on your epic journey. And I look forward to seeing you succeed more in the future, and hope that together at some point we'll be able to lift one another up, strengthen our ties together, and create something better, not just country by country, but as part of a destiny bond that's gonna create something truly incredible and amazing for the world. Alright, thank you for listening. That's all to say about that, and bye. So poops, if you want to support my work, feel free to donate down below or to click subscribe right now and share this video with a friend to support independent media. Everything you do helps. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next ones.